Okay, everyone, members of the council, officers, press, members of the public, welcome back. Thank you for being patient. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Before speaking to my amendment, which Councillor McLaren is happy to second, can I just check with officers that this amendment would have the implication that interested parties would be able to access the building, or do I need to put a specific line in the amendment to achieve that?
Mrs. Buchanan, is that one for yourself?
I was going to say, I'll take that, Provost.
Yes, of course, Mr. Cochrane, of course.
As I said, I think in response to Councillor Wan's question earlier, Councillor Davey, if people are looking to buy or lease property, then it's a reasonable excuse under the COVID restrictions to leave one's home. So that would not be a problem.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. I think I'll speak to my amendment. I made this amendment without knowing what Mr. Guild was going to be suggesting, or that there'd be an offer coming forward. So I'm pleased that that can be accommodated within the amendment. I'd asked for the amendment to be made after reading the report. And if you read through the report, I think it's clear that we, as of yet, don't know the full implications of the Court of Session's ruling. And I know Councillor Duff and Councillor Devine have mentioned concerns over the Forfeit Common Good Fund, but as of yet, we don't know what Angus Council, we as a council, will decide to be the accountancy procedure. With that in mind, I personally thought it was a bit putting the cart before the horse. How can we as councillors decide our preferred option if we do not know the financial implications of those options? For example, should, as written in the report, Angus Council decide that they would only be willing to fund the demolition costs and no ongoing costs, that would obviously skew the decision. Should Angus Council decide in May to make a different decision, that may influence the decision as well. So essentially, I did not believe that we had sufficient information to make a decision on our preferred. And obviously, bearing in mind that we must take into consideration the consultation replies, I still don't think that there is enough information there in order for us to make our minds up what the preferred way forward is. I'm also pleased that this will have the added benefit of allowing Mr. Guild or any interested parties access to the building with the delay into it. So I think this amendment covers both bases. We are able to see the Court of Session's impacts, and then we are also able to see what comes forward out of interest from local parties. I think my final one mention would be just, and this is just a general point in response to, I think Councillor Hands and other comments. We are currently spending over £400,000 to demolish the building. I think it's harder to justify spending that money when we haven't explored alternative options. And I think it's very hard to justify spending that money to get nothing out of it. Whereas we could perhaps spend less, depending on what Angus Council decide at the next meeting, and also get a fantastic community facility. So I'm happy to introduce the amendment, and I hope this allows more informed decision and also interested parties access to the building. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. And do you have a seconder?
Yes, it was Councillor McLaren.
Okay, Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I'm happy to second this amendment, Councillor Davies' amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other amendments? No. Comments then? No comments. Is the amendment then agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. McCaskill.
Just as Mrs. Buchanan said earlier, we're just to be clear what the council are agreeing to. So the members have agreed to the amendment by Councillor Davey as circulated, but that in addition, there is that the opportunity be given to any interested parties to allow access to the building.
Yes.
Yep. Yes, that's what we're agreeing to, members. Is that correct?
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Mr. McCaskill. Thank you, members. Okay, members, I'm going to change my screen. Agenda item number 8 is the timetable of meetings for the period August 2021 to June 2022. and it's recommended that we approve the timetables of meetings covering that period. Do we approve that?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Now, just members, just to say that we are approaching the 3 hours of the meeting. I think possibly the longest items hopefully have been dealt with. So I'm going to ask for your agreement that we continue to the finish of the business. Is that agreed?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item number 9 is the review of remote meetings arrangements update. Has anybody got any questions? No. Yes, Councillor Devine.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification, Deputy Provost, on page 136. Well, it's under 5 proposals. When we go all onto Teams, what happens when there's exempt items? Would there be a second Teams thing sent out for us, or I just need that clarified, please.
Yes, that's a good, very, very good point, because at the moment we go from Zoom to Teams. So Mrs. Buchanan?
Yes, I'm quite happy to respond to that, Chair. Yes, we could certainly do that. Councillor Devine, of course, would want to avoid any opportunity or chance that members of the public would be there during exempt items. So a separate Teams invite could be sent out quite easily, and we'd just have to remember, and I'm sure the clerk would remind us to go into that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cheap, question?
Thank you, Deputy Provost, again. Yeah, yeah, it wouldn't be my choice to go to Teams. I've said that before. I'm not a great supporter, but if we are, it's probably a question to Mrs. Buchanan and to the IT people. Can we get it functioning properly so that elected members are not muted out continually against their will by whatever causes that to happen? Because it might be the best method according to the pros and cons in this paper, but operationally it's a bit of a nightmare compared with Zoom to the users. So if we're going to actually recommend MS Teams, I'd like to get confirmation that all the blips in operating it and running it can get sorted out before we actually go with it.
Yes, I can only agree with you, Councillor Cheap. There, the Zoom seems to work exemplarily. The microphones, you switch it on, you switch it off, but the Teams, the amount of times it goes on to mute automatically, it's just unbelievable. And we really need to be absolutely assured that that is going to be the case. The same with Teams before we really agree to use that, I think. But Mrs. Buchanan, if you want to come back, or IT.
I think I'll defer to Ms. Faulkner, please, if I may. Can I just check that the councillors, yes, they are, sorry, I was just checking Councillor McMillan Douglas and Councillor Brown are back in, but I just see them now. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Deputy Provost. Caroline Cooper is actually still on the call, and she's very familiar with Teams, so she would be able to give you more information around the technical aspects of it, such as going on to mute. So if it's all right with yourself, Deputy Provost, I would ask Caroline if she can comment on this particular point.
Yes, please, because I think it's quite common to every individual member that the microphones just keep going off, and it's not really convenient.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we would, as we've said in the paper, as part of this, we would phase the switch over and obviously be looking at the performance and the protocols, because we'd be using Teams in a slightly different way with sort of slightly different additional software. So that would be part of this to make sure that that was the case.
That's very reassuring, Ms. Cooper. Thank you very much. Councillor Moore, a question?
Yes, Deputy Provost. I'm reading through, and if you're using Zoom, members of the public can download it free of charge off the internet. If we're using Teams, members of the public have got to have Office 365, or I believe Windows 10 will do it. But it has a facility to cut the public out from being able to participate. What are we proposing to do to avoid that?
Okay, I think we'll go to the IT expert, Ms. Cooper, again, please. Thank you.
Teams has a browser version which is free to use, and so that can be used on your phone or on your laptop or whatever device you have without charge.
So as long as we make public knowledge, then I'm not worried. But it's just a matter of ensuring people can still take part.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Miles, question?
Yes, another problem I found with Teams at times, well, one's an advantage. You can use the chat function to put questions in, and that works very well in Tayside contracts. But I found when I'm on the health board, that chat function is not available. So I don't know why it's available in some scenarios and not in others. So it'd be good if that is guaranteed that it's available, the chat function in Teams, because it is quite helpful to be able to put something in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Cooper, yes, please, thank you.
Yeah, would you like me to comment on that? Yes, that is down to whoever is running the meeting. They can set the parameters that are available or not available. And obviously, as part of the pilot, we'll be covering that sort of thing with members.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hand, a question?
Yes, it is. It's just to look at further consultation on that last point, because if you're going to use the chat function in Teams, my screen reader reads everything out, so it means then I can't hear what's happening in the meeting. So could we give that a little bit of consideration, please?
Yeah, Ms. Faulkner's nodding her head, Councillor Hand, so that's taken on board. Yeah, no problem. Now, Councillor Davey, question?
Yes, it was to ask, obviously this is being reviewed intermittently. Do we expect this to be a long-term feature of Angus Council going forward, where we have some committees entirely on Zoom, or do we expect to move to a hybrid option, or do we expect to move fully back in person, or essentially do we not know yet?
If I could answer that, this is a long-term solution. We would expect to be using Teams for all meetings. We're already using them for most internal council meetings with officers. And lots of other councils across Scotland are already using Teams for all of their committee meetings.
Sorry, just to clarify, so even if we could go back to in-person meetings, our expectation would be to use Microsoft Teams.
Oh, right. Sorry, you were asking whether or not there would be in-person meetings. I don't think that's for me to make that decision.
Okay, any other questions? No. Comments then? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. And as I raised this at the last meeting, I'm glad to see it come back with this approach. A couple of little things. I don't still recognise the GDPR issues that get highlighted here. This is a public meeting, a public forum, and obviously we're going to come back and look at this in a later time. But I still can't see the GDPR issues with us expressing views in a public forum. And whilst the views are recorded and stored, it's very handy for us to be able to refer back to them. Or if someone was to manipulate the images, we've got a hardcore record, a hard copy record, sorry, of what we've had before us. In general, though, I welcome this report, and I think that what we should also be doing, and it follows on from what Councillor Brady said in his question, that all meetings should be recorded going forward. So when we get back to normal times, we have the facility to record meetings and allow the public to participate, watch, check out on YouTube, all sorts of stuff. And one final point on the migration to Teams. I already emailed the Chief Executive on this, but Teams is a highly has many functions, as well as being able to broadcast and communicate with each other. And it would be good if we all got some proper training on it. I'm not saying that the issues with the muting and stuff like that is down to that, but there are loads of things that maybe officers contact us to do the chat functions, and you're maybe not sure how they work and all of that. So I think there's scope there for councillors to be brought in further with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Good points. Good points. Councillor Laurie, comment?
Yep, thank you, Deputy Provost. I've got 2 points. The first one is on remote meetings. There's no doubt that continuing to hold remote meetings for the time being is necessary. However, I know that some members will be itching to get back to face-to-face meetings, and with good reason too. I'd just like to say early on that as we return to normality, there should be flexibility in how we access our meetings. Some people will find in-person meetings more accessible. Some will be better able to engage online. And we need to have a hybrid model and cater to everyone if we're to encourage people from all walks of life to be councillors. The second point was just on the retention of the recordings of the council meetings. And in the interest of transparency, it's important that residents can go back and view how they've been represented on certain issues. I appreciate that most views take place in the immediate weeks following a meeting, but I still think it's important that people have that opportunity to go back and view slightly more historical content. And if possible, I would like to move an amendment to the report so that recordings of meetings are retained for 5 years. This would bring us in line with Glasgow and Edinburgh councils.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie, we'll come back to you about your amendment. Councillor Speed, a comment?
Yep, thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, it was just picking up on what Councillor MacDonald had highlighted. I too am still a little bit confused around the GDPR issues because traditionally when we held our meetings in chamber, they were public, albeit with the exception of exempt items. And therefore, that information was there, it was shared. And so I'm a little bit confused still as to how then it becomes a risk the longer that the meetings or the live links are left. So some clarity around that, because I do believe that the live links actually support our minutes in a much greater and truer way. They're a full accurate account. So I welcome that, and I also support Councillor Laurie's comments.
Okay, Councillor Speed, are you finished?
Yep, thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. Councillor Davey, a comment?
Yes, it was more of a comment on the review, and obviously we review this very often, and I suppose to back up what Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Laurie has said, and it's perhaps something for us to discuss at the next review in June. I do think there is scope for Angus Council to ensure that councillors can engage in a remote format. I think what remote meetings allow is a much broader range of councillors to put themselves forward, and obviously ahead of the council elections in 2022, we would like to see as many people consider putting themselves forward for all political parties and in no parties as well. And I think having remote meetings, and I know Councillor Laurie's been a student and myself as well, I know other councillors work full-time, and I know other councillors may have caring responsibilities or have young children. Remote meetings allow that flexibility where if you're away for work, you can dial into the meeting, finish your council business, and you remove that commute time. We also have the added benefit of saving travelling costs. And I mean, I know and I fully understand, and I've heard some councillors say, they prefer being in person, they think that the sense of debate's better. But I certainly think there needs to be that plethora of options, because to make our council more representative, I think we definitely have to have that option. And it means that, less time out from work, so people who work full-time can consider this a job. Young mothers, young fathers might think, actually, this is something I can do because I can have, from my sitting room, engage in council business and also look after my children. And for young students who may, be from Angus but move down to Glasgow for university, it's something that they can still engage in. So I suppose my point is a broader one, perhaps put the marker down that it's something that I would hope to discuss at the next review, whether we can start adopting some form of remote meetings on a permanent basis rather than just using this to get through the pandemic. I think this has shown that remote working works, and in many ways, the public of Angus has a much better opportunity to see what happens at council business than they did before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Blaze.
Yes, thank you, convener. As others have said, I just don't see any GDPR issue here at all. We, as far as I know, publish objections that are made to the Development Standards Committee, and they stay up there without time. There are, I've no doubt, reports of our meetings that are published, and they'll be archived and they'll be available to the public without limit of time. And if Glasgow and Edinburgh find it's perfectly acceptable under the law to keep these records for 5 years, I don't see why we can't either. When it comes to hybrid meetings in the future, I mean, this really is a no-brainer for all the reasons other councillors have said. And further to that, I would add that if we're expecting our staff to move to working remotely, then surely we should be leading the way in some of this. And yeah, as I say, it's a no-brainer, and I look forward to that developing in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Before I take any further comments, Mrs. Buchanan, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Would it be helpful if I tried to explain the GDPR issue so people were a bit more familiar with what that was in effect?
Yes,
so,
please.
So in terms of that, obviously all of us, including the public and objectors, etc., are recorded when we put our cameras on and then if we speak in terms of the meetings. Now that's different from what we had before when we all sat in the chamber, because we're not being recorded then. Now, the purpose of the recording, I guess, could be twofold. I'm sure the committee clerk finds it useful when providing their minute, but normally they would use their notes, but certainly they could use it for that purpose. And then once the minute's approved, then that purpose is no longer required in terms of it. The other purpose would be to allow members of the public to view the meetings either live or, as you say, at a later stage. Now, in terms of GDPR, we're required to have their consent, which is part of it, and you'll know that when we come into the meeting that's provided for, and also in terms of any deputy, it's made clear to them that this is what happens, it will be recorded. But the other part of it is not just about getting their consent, it's also, the GDPR went a bit further than the old data protection legislation. And what it said, it must be collected for a specified, explicit and legitimate purpose, and not further processed in a manner that's incompatible with that. So we need to have a reason why we're doing it. And the reason, from what you've said, is perfectly legitimate, is so that members of the public can access the meetings at a later stage. Now, looking at the data, we need to be able to say that that's what it's been used for. And as time goes on, so for example, if we're talking about 5 years, it's probably unlikely, if not unheard of, that members of the public would want to look at that data, and they themselves might not feel too comfortable with 4 or 5 years down the line a recording of them still being available on YouTube. And that's when there could potentially come an issue with the ICO if they asked us to justify how long we're keeping it for. Now, I appreciate other councils may have taken different views on this, but our view, I guess, was that looking at the data after a couple of months, it seems that there wasn't many hits. Now, granted, we've not been doing this very long, but that seems to be the pattern to date. So we thought a year was more than ample in terms of allowing the public access, and at the same time getting the balance right in terms of complying with this necessary test. And that's the words that's used in terms of Article 5. It needs to be necessary. So I hope that clarifies the position a bit more, but happy to take questions on it. And it's not a fixed and fast rule, because obviously it's a question of degree and discretion, but we have to remember that test still needs to be met at the same time as allowing the public access to the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Buchanan. Councillor Whiteside, a comment?
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and apologies for no picture. The rural broadband issues we were discussing earlier are coming into play with me today, again, so not great. I would totally concur with the argument for being flexible going forward. We don't want to take a step backwards, and even if we do go back to in-person meetings, we should not lose the ability for hybrid meetings or for the meetings to be filmed and made available to public. It is much more accessible for members of the public to view, and I know that I've got community council members who are now watching council meetings in their own time when it's convenient for them. So
The argument about taking them down when the minutes were up, I think, is not valid, because the minutes are very brief. You cannot always confirm what was said by whom from the minutes. They're brief. So I think at least a year. My preference would be for longer than a year, because you may want to go back to the same meeting the previous year, for example. You might want to go back to the budget meeting from the previous year, and it might be just over a year and you don't have access to it. And I think Councillor MacDonald's point about people using clips out of context is very valid. If you were able to go back and confirm from the full meeting, it would be excellent. So I would urge flexibility going forward, and hopefully, like has been discussed, we can discuss it further at a future meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. Councillor Hand, a comment?
Yeah, it might actually end up being a question in the middle of it as well, but mainly a comment. I would just like to say that I agree with most of the comments that's come forward, both in terms of improving access to elected offer for encouraging people, also to looking at, and I think we should, when we're looking at moving to teams, we should also be looking at the hybrid function as well, of having in-place meeting and also people accessing remotely. And I think the importance there, again, is twofold. One, we're promoting ourselves as a digital council, but also looking at the climate change and carbon reduction requirements, what better than actually just staying at home for a meeting if you don't have to go into Forfar. Well, it's just a no-brainer. We can certainly do something there. The comment I was going to make, and it's kind of been touched upon already as well, in terms of the existence of council minutes and council agendas. They go back to 1996. Now, taken on board what Mrs. Buchanan has just said in terms of members of the public's participation and the restrictions on GDPR for time-limited time periods, I totally get that. However, I do think there's also levels of variation potentially possible there as well, because obviously for something like the quasi-judicial committees, we probably wouldn't want to be keeping it up as long. But if it's a service committee or full council and we've not had any deputations whatsoever, then what is the difficulty of definitely extending to 5 years? Because we, as public or as elected members, we're already, our names and information's out there for the general public. Generally, and I could be wrong with this as well, it's viewed with the senior officers also participating in the meeting. I think at that level, it's also assumed, and I could be wrong, and Mrs. Buchanan, please correct me, but some less senior officers' names, we can't give that information to constituents, but generally members of the public viewing this will be familiar with the names of officers as well. So I do think there's a really good case to extend the viewing publicly for 5 years. But I also wonder the issue about archiving as well, even if it's not publicly available. I think for reference purposes and potentially with some restriction put on it, but I do actually think we need to have a record of the meetings retained so that people that have got need to access it can actually access it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hand. Mrs. Buchanan, is that an old hand, or are you wanting to come back in again? No, it's disappeared. Okay.
Sorry, I've seemed to have real problems with the mute button today, so apologies for that. I'm quite happy. I wasn't intending to come back in, but in terms of what Councillor Hans has said, I suppose the only point to add is not just in terms of consent, of course, it's in terms of it being necessary. We need to look at that. But I hear there's a lot of members' concern about this, so perhaps we can look at this further if members want me to do this, or review because a lot of councils have just started doing this too. It's relatively new in terms of these online meetings, so that maybe the GDPR issues haven't been at the forefront of their mind as much as maybe it has in Angus. So I'm not sure, or we haven't got an awful lot of data here, I guess, yet on it. So perhaps what we could do is agree something today and then bring something back in terms of the different aspects that Councillor Hans has mentioned, and see if there's some way we could have some sort of almost like a hybrid system of retaining the documentation in terms of the live meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Buchanan. Councillor Boyd, a comment?
Yes, I must confess I was a bit. I felt that 12 months was a fine balance, and until Councillor Whiteside mentioned that sometimes some things could fall in a little bit over a year, so maybe a 2-year. There would be a nice balance between the 5 years that it seems some are wanting and the 12 months that's in the report. So I think for the remote meetings as well, there have been good comments made about things. Other things I've been thinking about is if you're unwell, you can still be at home and come in and be part of the meeting, and therefore get your voting as well. Same with the weather. I've seen over the 10 years I've been a councillor that we've had to postpone full council meetings because of a blizzard. I think we possibly might have had to have done that in February, but because we never thought anything about it, because we were all doing them via Zoom meetings anyway. So that has to be taken into account. You're quite right, for the full-time and younger people that are here, and we should be encouraging younger councillors. I've always advocated that. We need to do succession planning, and therefore, we've got to ensure that these younger people are trying to hold down a full-time job and being a responsible councillor. We need to give them as much help and support as they can. I personally am happy that I'm not travelling half an hour up and half an hour back to Forfar. I'm also, Councillor Speed will be happy with me on this one. It's also saving the planet, because I'm not driving up in my car there and back as well. So there are so many win-wins for us having a mixture of that. And finally, of course, if anyone was on holiday, they could actually come online and be able to take part in any meeting whilst on holiday as well. And finally, it also could reduce the lack of attendance, because sometimes, especially for the work back to the young and working, they sometimes really find it hard. But therefore, as we all know, we all have a tick box at the end of the year, how many attendances we all turn out. I think it's done on an annual report. This would mean that there are even less reasons for your attendances to be low in any council meetings. Thank you.
Deputy Provost, could I have a point of clarification, please?
Yes, of course.
Just based on what Jackie Buchanan said, the bit that I don't understand about the GDPR aspect is that Westminster operates Hansard, the Hansard system, and those are held for centuries. Now, I know GDPR subsequently changed and changed since then, but that's the bit I just don't quite get with these meetings. So where does that sit in relation to what we're doing? Because the video record is, in effect, as Councillor Speed said, a minute of the meeting. It's just that our minutes aren't as detailed as in other forums.
Well, I'm happy to come in on that if you'd like, convener.
Yes, of course.
Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. I guess the difference with Hansard, and to be honest, I don't know what the legislative framework is there, will be that there's a legal requirement to maintain records. There's a legal requirement to maintain council records for several years. I think it's 6 years. So we do that through the minutes, and Mr. McCaskill will keep the minutes for that length of time. So that's a legal requirement to do that. And of course, it's not quite as obtrusive and as intimate and personal as it is in terms of video recording. And there's no legal framework around a requirement to keep hold of the video recordings. But as I said, I'm quite happy to bring further detail back on this and look at it a bit more holistically in terms of maybe different options for different committees, and just check out the detail. All I'm saying is what the law says, and it is different in terms of the minutes of the House of Commons, and also in terms of our council minutes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore, comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. I've been listening to this and comparing it with South of the Border, and how long do we have to hold the minutes for freedom of information? Because South of the Border, I was required to hold all my emails for 6 years, theoretically, so that if anybody wanted to query, they could find out what I'd said about various items. I don't see that this is much different. I think that we could go to some sort of archive after, say, 3 years. But I mean, I keep getting researchers emailing me wanting information about this, that, and the other. Their research could be helped considerably if they could go to council meetings and see what was said and get the gist of the ideas. Our minutes are so brief that you couldn't do that if you're researching. Therefore, I'm quite happy to support 5 years, possibly, as I say, with archiving, so you need to submit a freedom of information request or something after 3.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Cheap, comment?
I'll keep this very brief. Yeah, just listening to what everybody's saying, I think is I'm sure there's probably going to be general acceptance on the whole idea of why there needs to be a hybrid of going forward. Some people might want to meet personally. Some people will, for all the reasons that have been stated, like to stay online to do this. I think it brings huge advantages. Sometimes it does call for being in the same room physically. However, I totally agree with what Councillor Laurie has brought forward, and I think the whole idea of keeping them for 5 years is that we can individually go back and check what was said by who, at what time, whatever, on any issue that way. It's an easy means for us to do it. And I accept what other people have said. The minutes that we get, I'm not criticising anybody, but they don't do justice to the debate or a lot of the decision making. I think that gets taken, and so it's not exactly the most accurate of records. So I would say this is becomes the most accurate record, and we should maintain that. And certainly for the life of a council, we're here for 5 years. Quite often things come up year 3, year 4. You have to go right back. We've been discussing Lochside Leisure today. Some of it even before my time, but some very early on in my time as a councillor. It would be useful to be able to go back and listen to what was said at the time again. So I see no harm in that. I think it have positive benefits all round.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Mrs. Buchanan, do you wish to come back in?
Yes, just to clarify a point, although the legal position is that we've to hold the records, as I said, for 6 years in terms of our minutes, Mr. McCaskill has informed me that we hold them in perpetuity. So I just want to clarify that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durno, comment?
Yeah, just following up with what Councillor Cheap's saying, it's good for planning because on outside bodies that you're on as well, I mean, I'm on roads, Northern Roads, and you know, working on the A96 or the A90, it takes about 5 years before the road gets completed. So it's actually good if you could look back and say, well, this route couldn't be done because there was objections for that, and just to see how everything panned out, it would be good for people for reference. And I think it's a good idea to keep it, you know, for records and things like that. Even as a training thing, it would be good.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've heard Mrs. Buchanan is going to, if we agree, bring back a further report with other options about a hybrid system, about different options, possibly striking a balance between what's in the report recommendations today of 12 months. I think she's heard it quite well. Some people want it for 5 years. So I'm going to suggest, and Councillor Laurie, you may still want to move an amendment here, but I'm going to suggest if Mrs. Buchanan and her team can bring something else back for our consideration, and at that point we can make a decision whether an amendment is required. Does that satisfy members?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10 is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, and it's a report by the Director of Finance. I think we'll just go straight to any.
Councillor Laurie did have his hand up, I have to say.
Oh, sorry. I don't see it, Councillor Boyd.
No, exactly. It's very hard, but I just thought I'd let Ben.
It's up now. Councillor Laurie?
I was just looking for clarification. So does that mean that we're essentially deferring the decision and not making it 12 months yet? We're going to come back to that.
That's my understanding of it. We've agreed to defer this one, and Mrs. Buchanan will bring back a further report with all the suggestions that's been made today.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, can I just clarify? I think some of these recommendations we actually need to agree today. So I wonder if we could do that and maybe agree to bring back on the retention aspect of it. Can I just look at the actual recommendations, and Mr. McCaskill, I'm sure will help me out in terms of it, because I actually think this is Mr. McCaskill's report. No, it's not. It's Mr. Ingram's. It changed, yes.
There's another report coming back in June, Mrs. Buchanan, anyway. So on that basis then...
McCaskill, do you want to come in? Because I think you'd sent me a message saying that...
Yes, Deputy Provost. Thanks, Mrs. Buchanan. I think it's in the discussion really largely focused in terms of the retention period, and that forms only one of the recommendations. So my take on members of today is that recommendations 1, 3 and 4 have been agreed, but that the report coming to the Council on the 24th of June will include options, as Mrs. Buchanan talked about, in terms of hybrid meetings in relation to retention periods. I see Councillor Laurie's nodding his head. Hopefully that captures things.
Is that okay, members? Is that agreed then?
Agreed.
Sorry, Provost, what would that mean for this meeting's records?
Well, what it's meaning is, Councillor Davey, is if you look at the recommendations, we were going to agree recommendation 1, 3 and 4, but we're not agreeing 2 for the retention period of 12 months. And Mrs. Buchanan is going to bring back another report to another cycle of the Council with other options of retention periods and a hybrid, taking into account what members have said today, I think. That's my understanding of it.
Just to clarify, Deputy Provost, so how long will this meeting be kept for? Will that be the old system or will that be the 1 year, or will that be to be determined?
Well, I think it'll be any meetings that's been recorded up to now, depends on what retention period we agree at the next report will be the time that these meetings are held. Is that correct, Mrs. Buchanan? If we change it and say it's going to be 3 years, this meeting will be kept online for 3 years.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, is that everybody satisfied?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on to number 10, the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. And we'll just go straight, I think, to questions. Any questions on this? No, any comments? My screen's not playing the game here. Okay, then, if there's no questions or comments, you have the recommendations in front of you in the report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 11 is the Economic Development Land and Property Strategy 2021 to 2030. And it's a report by the Director of Strategic Policy Transformation and Public Sector Reform. Are there any questions? Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I had a question about the Montrose Fortis Road Industrial Estate. And as I understand it, one of the issues there is that there are, I think, 2 empty plots, and the impediment for anyone moving in is the rather large high voltage connection costs. And I just wonder, given that we are a go-to place for business, whether the administration had not considered putting that into their budget to obviously facilitate somebody moving in, because it's a big extra cost if you have to spend potentially a six-figure sum to connect up your electricity. So it's a question really for the administration. Was that ever considered? Because I didn't see any sign of that on any budget bids either accepted by the administration or not. It just seems like something we should be considering.
Okay, who's going to answer this then?
I'm prepared to answer it if you like.
Yes, of course, Councillor McMillan-Douglas. Sorry, I didn't see your screen there. You must have been on one of the other screens.
Well, I spent some time out of the meeting, as you know.
Yes, okay.
No, it's a good point raised by Councillor Duff, and it is one that we considered. And I think it in part I thought was answered in the report, actually, in the item 11 report, which said that we will consider two options. One, we will look to see if these costs or the overall energy provision costs reduce, which they may do for a number of reasons. And secondly, we will look to some sort of bridging finance. But those two things have to be considered, and therefore a decision at this point does not have to be made. But I completely take Councillor Duff's point that we don't want to underuse very developable land in Montrose for longer than we have to. And indeed, we don't want to leave Montrose unconnected to the A90. And I think the actual point here is called the A9, but anyway, to the A90 any longer than we have to. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cheap, question?
Yes, it's actually a question. Oh, it's actually a question for Alison Smith if she's around.
She was on earlier. Okay.
Well, my question really is in relation to the Rydens report. And if I've read through this whole report correctly, part of it said that there's a lack of resource for development land and for commercial development for industrial estates and offices, etc., looking forward, and that's a priority for Angus Council economic development. And part of the report in Rydens were saying that's part of all of that. I think it was point 22 Rydens report that's saying that the following emerges priorities for Angus, and it brought up about North Angus. It also mentioned Carnoustie supporting future development of land and industrial estate infrastructure. And bearing in mind that it's saying in the report that there's a need for the council to develop and create more of that, and bearing in mind that there's 200,000 square feet of designated business park and industrial estate at Carlogie at Carnoustie, I'm wondering if the council will actively pursue perhaps helping develop that piece of land as part of this, because that it already has planning permission, as we all know, for that purpose, and it may be something that the council could get actively involved in itself. I'm wondering if Mrs. Smith could actually refer to that one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cheap. Mrs. Smith certainly on. Mrs. Smith, please. I think Mrs. Smith's having trouble with her microphone.
Yes, I'm having a good conversation with myself, I think. Apologies for that. It's just acknowledging the Rydens report was obviously conducted throughout 2019 and finalised in 2020, so some things have moved on. But just recognising that within the recommendations, there are a number of things we would want to consider and bring forward in due course. This was really a starting point for us of a large-scale review, which we hadn't done, and then start to consider the various options within that. So at the moment, we're focusing on North Angus and the Brecon proposals, as outlined in the earlier reports today around T-City deal. But obviously everything else within that, our actions, the action plan will very much be a living document for us that we'll be looking to bring to keep that updated and go through a series of recommendations within that and consider all options. We're very conscious of the position in terms of land at the moment. I don't know if I'm allowed to add something additional just to Councillor Duff's previous comment, if that's okay, that might be of interest regarding Forties Road. That I actually just got an update today that we're actually in advanced discussions on the sale of those last 2 plots at Forties Road, which may reduce the burden upon us to undertake those costs. So that's just something that we're actively involved in at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, I just like, you know, I've listened to what Mrs. Smith's saying. I'd just like to just get confirmation that this is something that maybe, I mean, if the council's saying they're short of development land, that they would at some point, in the knowledge that there's planning permission at Carlogie, that they would look at doing something to make it come true, real, you know.
Okay, Mrs. Smith.
I just wanted to give you a chance to speak, Alison. That was really all.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Braze, question? Councillor Braze, you're on mute.
Thanks, convener. Yes, my question's around the extension to the Brechin Business Park. Now, this has been on the table since ever I became a councillor nearly 4 years ago, and there's been money in the budget for it. I realise there might be some commercial sensitivity around this, but I wondered if you could give us a brief update on where we are with it, please.
Mrs. Smith, please.
Yes, happy to do that. So as you say, yes, it certainly has been within the capital plan for some time. It was something we were very keen to look at. Brechin Business Park Phase 1 has been very popular, and you'll know that there's currently a planning application in for the last plot on that site that we have. So we're very conscious of the situation there. And we did start to explore that a number of years ago, but commercially that wasn't something that was making financial sense to do at the time. This is something we've brought back now, thinking about the development there alongside the work on the Rural Mobility Hub again, which was referred to the earlier report today on Tay-City Deal. And that's something that we want to develop these projects at the same time, looking at the opportunities there and what that might mean. So as one progresses through the Rural Mobility Hub, we're considering the implications for the rest of that site at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, question?
Yes, I'm looking at page 190. Has there been a widespread consultation with all the lessees to find out what they think about the properties they're in?
Yes, that's something that we put in place actually a number of years ago before we actually started this study. It was something I was very keen to do as part of our customer engagement, to understand what our tenants thought of the properties, of the service they got as well. But you know, what did they think about the level of repairs, etc. So we have an annual survey with our tenants, and we've developed a sort of a relationship program where they've got us on call. They can come to us anytime with general queries, but we make sure that we're speaking to them regularly, understanding their issues. And particularly at the start of COVID, we went out to all our tenants to understand what the situation was for their business, to look at what the issues were that were emerging, and that ongoing conversation is part of the wider sort of business relationship program that we have in place anyway.
All right, because I'm just a bit concerned about the comment that in the main the property portfolio is fit for purpose because the occupancy rate's 90%. I mean, there are people who may not be able to move out because they can't find where they need to go to, or they can't find the size of property they need, and it was just seemed to be a very sweeping statement.
I understand in the broad sense that is, I mean, that's the general feedback we have, that the people who are in are happy with what they have at the moment. So we keep that high level of retention because people are generally content. We don't have a high turnover. But through that relationship program, we were able to identify, for example, a business who were taking up 2 smaller units, and we were able to move them into a larger unit a couple of years ago, freeing up 2 smaller units to allow another 2 businesses to come in. So by having that more regular dialogue, we've been able to do that. Obviously, we're constrained by what we have, but we also use a program called a website called Nova Loca. All our properties, all council properties, whether economic development or other, are listed on there, as are all private sector. So we also signpost people to other properties if that's more suitable for them through our property searches. But it's that kind of engagement that allows us to identify if somebody's perhaps in a property that's too big for them, too small for them, and try and make some sort of more positive moves out of that.
Wonderful. And the only other question I've got is, in the recommendation, you're saying you're going to bring back reports to committee. Which committee?
I think that'll depend in terms of the decisions that we're making, whether we're looking at disposal of assets, which are generally done through Mr. Cochrane's team, whether we're looking at land acquisition, depending on the nature of the actual actions. We need to explore that further now.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Some development land that we do have is, of course, Orchard Bank in Forfar. So it's a wee bit concerning to see that some of it is liable to flooding. Can you just give us some idea of how much is liable to flooding, and if there are any engineering solutions to it? Be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the information that we have from working with SEPA, which is presented in the report as well, and teams have been working that from across various services of the councils, from economic development, obviously, and roads, property side of things as well. So there's ongoing discussions with SEPA at the moment to actually explore further what has come from their initial report, to identify if that is still the position, and also obviously to look at what the mitigation could be and the costs that go with that. So that is something that is ongoing at the moment. We've been working through that for some time now, but hoping to at some point to be able to come back fairly soon with a better idea of what those costs might be for mitigation measures. Fortunately, they don't have an impact on the current sale that we're liaising with on the moment on the roadside, but obviously it is a concern in terms of the other sites that remain.
That's good, thank you.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Just a quick question for Alison. I was wondering if she's anticipating any reduction in demand for the office type accommodation, given that businesses are realising they can work with many more remote employees these days.
I think we're actually in a fortunate position that we don't have offices. The bulk of the economic development stock is, small units, industrial units. So we're actually, fortunately, in a better position, perhaps, than some authorities in terms of that stock that we have. So yes, absolutely right. That we're seeing people are saying, well, we don't need the larger premises. So it's not something in terms of impacting on the economic development at the moment, because the bulk of ours are these small units, and those are small businesses that have, many of them have been able to continue to operate as trades, etc. So at the moment, we're not seeing any vast change in demand.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Boyd.
It's actually a comment, that's why I literally just put my hand up. I don't know if Councillor Braze has got a question.
I think maybe Councillor Braze is an old hand, but I'm not sure.
No, I've got a comment too.
Okay. Councillor Braze, comment, and then we'll go to Councillor Boyd. We'll go to comments now. Thank you.
Yes, my comment is that I've just looked on the Nova Loca site, and the Old Brecon Leisure Centre is still not listed on there. That's my comment. Thanks.
Okay, that's noted, I'm sure. Thank you. Councillor Boyd, comment?
Yes, it's to Alison. Look, I know I've got every confidence that she will keep the plate spinning for the business park in Carnoustie, remembering that we not only have one, but we have two. It's been in and out of the capital plan for the last 15 years. Over 10 years ago is how I was elected. So I'm sure we'll keep that plate spinning, and just like we have the £5 million Early Learning Centre, we'll ensure that we get the business park that Carnoustie so rightfully deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Fairweather, comment?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I think when you look at the size of this report, I certainly welcome the report, and can I say thank you to Vivian Smith, but and Alison Smith. I mean, it's a tremendous piece of work. It's a vast piece of work, and it's looking forward. Just what we need. Just to let people see we're not standing still. And Arbroath is the place. Angus, I should say, is the place to come. So thank you, thank you, Alison, and any of your team. It's a tremendous piece of work. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Miles, comment?
Yes, it's a general comment. When creating development land, we're losing quite a bit of prime agricultural land, and that always concerns me, because once it's built on, you can never get it back. I was aware of during the war, they ploughed up golf courses and things to get more agricultural land to produce food. This ties in with the next report as well. So I think we have to be more, let's say, take more account of where we actually have some of these developments. If you look in the past, a lot of developments were on, let's say, non-productive or less productive areas. And I think we should maybe concentrate more on that than using prime agricultural land for some of these big developments. I can appreciate the ease of servicing on these big estates, and if you take a big field, it's easier to service than something that's narrower or with burns or rivers going through it. But we are losing quite a bit of prime agricultural land, and I would rather see that reduced as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Davey, a comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. I think as economic development, it would be remiss of me not to comment, and I think we've seen the fantastic work done by Angus Council and our officials to support local businesses, especially through COVID and this plan here, and to promote growth and our business occupancy, and dispose of our unused offices and space to find productive use of it, while also making sure that the space that we do provide is what local businesses want. I would also just, like to highlight some of the key points within the reports to, when we've discussed it before, we've had an occupancy rate above 90% above periods, in the report over 80%. Income's often been ahead of schedule, over 1,200 jobs supported, and an additional 1,100 jobs since 2013, and a further 80 million of capital investment. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in how this is helping support our communities. In Forth, for myself and Orchard Bank, we've seen new investments, and for those that have not been through in Forth for a while, new petrol station, new shops, additional jobs in the area. And obviously, as has been mentioned, Brecon Business Park in full use. And the report is just jam-packed full of so many positives. I just wanted to highlight some of the key ones which jumped to my mind. And I think our property portfolio is so important in securing businesses. And I think we must work with our private providers to provide opportunities for growth and investment. And I think that's what we've shown, and our officials have shown that they're doing. So I do welcome these plans and the work that is being done to continue support local jobs and our economic growth.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davey. No more comments. Okay, members, we have the one recommendation in the report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 12 is the Angus Food Growing Strategy and Action Plan. And it's a report by Vivian Smith, the Strategic Policy Transformation and Public Sector Reform. Any questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I found this a really exciting strategy document. I think there's a lot going on in Angus, and we can be rightly proud of that. And I'm particularly proud of the work that's going on in Kirriemuir around sustainable Kirriemuir, the food hub, and further afield with the social supermarket, and the way these organisations are linking up with Voluntary Action Angus, for example, and reaching out. But I'm curious to know just how much appetite there might be, if pardon the pun, on with other communities around developing a similar model, so that we can extend that good work and we can really build on the enthusiasm that people in Kirriemuir across all the generations have had around being involved in growing our own and tackling climate change and improving the biodiversity in our communities. I think it's a fantastic model, and you know, we should be sharing that more widely. And I'm just curious to know how other villages, towns are engaging with that agenda, which would help all of us actually.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I noticed it's Miss Haig that actually wrote the report. Is she in the meeting, or would it be Miss Smith that would answer your question?
I'm happy to come
yes.
back.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Provost, thank you. So this report really is the start. I mean, there is an expectation through the Community Empowerment Act that we develop a food growing strategy, and there has been a lot of engagement with communities trying to consult as widely as possible as to the best way to go about developing this. The actual requirement is for the development of allotments, particularly in areas where there's known to be more social disadvantage. However, this report, you'll see, covers a much broader spectrum that the strategy just now as it's outlined than just allotments. And that's because communities and partners through the Community Planning Partnership have been engaged with us in moving this on and developing it. But what I would say is this is the first time we've had a food strategy for Angus, and I would hope that we would be able to build on that over time, Councillor Bell, and engage with as many communities as possible over the next period.
Okay, thank you, Ms Smith and Councillor Bell. Councillor Speed, a question.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, it's a comment because there wasn't any other hands up at the time, but I'm happy to wait.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durno, a question?
Thanks. It won't go off. Thanks. I'd just like to ask Vivian Smith if this is really exciting, because I was just out at Igmithy yesterday and they've got quite a lot of ground out there that they're not quite sure what to do. I'd like to know is how can we implement this, if you're saying partners, how can we implement this on ground that's maybe other housing associations ground and people, communities want to take part in? How can we engage with them, and how can we get it off the ground, as in like buying equipment and plants and seeds and things like that? Because obviously that's going to need funding for things like that.
There are a lot of, Deputy Provost, through yourself, there are a number of different grants that are available to help with growing and equipment and those kinds of things. Lots of small grants available. So if there is an interested community, I would suggest that they get support to actually help them develop that.
Yeah, yes, thanks. And who would they go in touch with to do that? Would it be the local community council? Would that be a way forward to work this, or?
Really, I think the first point of contact would be through the communities team or through our external funding service.
Right, that's great. Thanks for that. Just want to know what to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMillan Douglas, a question?
No comment.
Okay, no problem. Councillor Miles, question?
Yes, I just wondered, has the agricultural community been consulted in this? Because they're responsible for actually producing most of the food in the area, and they could, one, assist quite considerably in some of the allotment type areas, or with guidance and advice and whatnot, and also what actual area we're speaking about. Because is it just urban areas for growing food, or is this taking on wider scopes of agricultural land? Because I do have a lot of concerns with that. Thank you.
Thanks. Through yourself, Councillor Fotheringham. The consultation was a wide consultation. but I'm not aware that the agricultural community actually responded to it. But the idea behind this originally was about allotments for people in more urban areas, so the kind of garden areas at the back of houses, if communities could come together to develop those. Some of the council allotments behind our council houses are, there's quite a bit of land in there that could be looked at. There is an opportunity as well for other land around about towns to begin to look at other possibilities, but it was more the kind of smaller, if I think about Carnoustie, for example, in Carnoustie they decided to develop a community orchard, or was that Moneyfeith? Sorry if I've got that one wrong, but it's about beginning to develop that thinking with communities who want to grow things for themselves, as opposed to the bigger, broader developments of food production. However, I'm sure over time, making those connections between what we're hoping to do in terms of agricultural developments through our CASI, we would be able to connect those two groups of people better.
Well, thank you for that, because it did concern me. If it's just the utilisation of urban areas, again, I don't have a huge problem with it, but it wasn't clear if this was a land grab to get other
no, and
food production. No.
I think the other thing to mention, Councillor Miles, is it's also, as I was saying, extended beyond the allotments, so that buying local becomes something that's really important as well. And the farming offers, I guess, locally would be really useful in developing those arrangements with communities to get that fresh produce, to develop cooking skills, more healthy eating, taking it into those areas as well is really important.
Thank you. I'm all for food from our own resources. Reminds me of what happened in the 70s. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, a question?
Yes, two questions, in fact, Deputy Provost. Vivian, on page 297, it's referring to fair trade. And it says the council have 21 schools throughout Angus who are fair trade registered, a number of schools having achieved fair trade status. The first question is, what is the difference between registered and status? And do we know how many schools have achieved fair trade status out of the 21?
Sorry, Councillor Moore, and I was just trying to find the page there. No, I don't have that detail. I'm not sure if any colleagues are on from schools and learning that would perhaps have that detail, but I'm happy to get it for you and pass that to you. My understanding is that it's a difference between signing up to be a fair trade, having an interest in fair trade, and actually delivering the food that is fair trade stamped, if you like. That's the difference.
And the second question is, I read through this and I can see that there are fleeting mentions of schools. Are you proposing to go back to the old sort of domestic science days where the children are taught about the nutrition and taught how to prepare it so that they can feed themselves properly?
I think, Councillor Muir, schools are always conscious of health and well-being, and nutritional issues are part of the curriculum generally, but again, I don't have the detail on that for every school. And I think in terms of the community side of it, which this strategy is focused on, whether that's with young people or adults, it's about encouraging that healthier approach to food, let's say. And so there are some community organisations who support families with their cooking skills. That has the added benefit of being a social engagement event. Clearly that's not happening at the moment because of the restrictions, but the more we can do, again, when things open up, you know, the better for all concerned.
Thank you.
Councillor Cheap, a comment? Sorry, a question?
Actually, it just caught me out, Deputy Lewis. It's a comment I want to make.
Okay, so we'll go. Councillor Speed had her hand up first for comments. We'll come back to you, Councillor Cheap. Councillor Speed, a comment?
Mind Councillor Cheap going first? Just either or.
On you go, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Deputy Provost. I fully support our foods grown strategy, especially as it has tackling poverty and increasing wellbeing in the heart of all that it hopes to achieve. I certainly believe that the pandemic has made us all think differently and has no doubt stimulated people's sense of the world around them and how they connect and make use of the land and their environments. I've certainly been encouraged that many individuals and groups within my ward have recently been developing and exploring opportunities, such as the Pippins Community Orchard Group with apple tree planting throughout the town, and they have hopes of engaging with schools as well as residents and communities who are wanting to connect with each other and make better use of unused or unutilised lands and land space and shared space. And I certainly know that the communities team are actively involved in supporting these desires. I'm confident that this is something that will continue to grow and come to fruition. A couple of puns in there, not that it's a competition.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. Councillor McMillan-Douglas, a comment.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Yes, I too hugely welcome the idea and encouragement of more people growing food in their gardens and in allotments where they do not have gardens. I think it's socially good. I think it's good for health and all the things which are laid out in the strategy, and very strongly support that. I think Councillor Miles and I have when on the Tayside Contracts Board, we also tried to encourage using local food in our schools. And Tayside Contracts seemed to run into problems there because there was fairly new legislation that seemed to make that more difficult than it had been hitherto. I think as part of the strategy, we should be looking at that because, as is said in the strategy, we have a wonderful area for agriculture here, and it's quite extraordinary that we're not using more local products in our schools. Just finally, I think there is a difference between this and commercial farming, and although there's a link I see through the CASI, and I'm sure various farmers will have been involved through that, I rang up my local NFU and they weren't aware of this paper. I don't think they had been involved in the consultation, and I would suggest as we go forward that we do involve them. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan-Douglas. Councillor Cheap, a comment.
Yeah, just a very quick one. I just listened to what everybody was saying and the support that everybody's giving to this. And I think if everybody's really interested in urban development, particularly listen to what Councillor Miles was saying as well, I would actively encourage people to come and see the Food is Free team in Carnoustie, who have really made amazing inroads and development with community fruit and vegetable gardens in Panda Lane in Carnoustie. They've had their share of problems this year when their place was set on fire, but they've fought right back, and community has got behind them financially as well to support them. So, and it's amazing, really, if you go down and see that. And I really would actively encourage councillors from all boroughs to go and see what can be done by people as volunteers to give back to the community. It's amazing. One big shout out for Food is Free.
Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Councillor Boyd, comment?
Councillor Cheap partly beat me to it. I was about to mention the food is free, an absolutely marvellous thing. I was going to say about maybe when this report comes back, Carnoustie could be the case study because not only do we have the Food is Free, who are doing exceptionally well. The fire that destroyed their polytunnel is now been replaced. That was funded by a local farmer, so thank you to the farmer who's helped them out from there. So from the ashes, we have an absolute wonderful thing. And of course, what we're trying to do is food is free. So, you know, they should do it. But of course, it's not the only one in Carnoustie. I'm not sure about the orchard, Vivian, but I know that there's the Carnoustie Allotment Society, and in fact, there are 3 or 4 allotments, and they've been screaming out for years to get them. And in fairness, Alan McEwen did help in that situation of getting the one very close to Councillor Cheap's father-in-law's house. And there are around about 30 or 40 allotments in there, and so they need the praise as well. So if you are looking for a case study the next time, or any of the councillors want to come and see what's going on in Carnoustie as far as this is concerned, especially with the Food is Free, would love to invite you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'll just join in by saying that there are so many different models when it comes to community food growing, and a lot of them work really well. And I think, you know, if we have a strategy, then those groups can learn from each other and develop what they're doing. I think it's a wonderful thing. But certainly, if any councillors want to go and visit the Brecon Community Garden, I'm sure they'd be made most welcome to see what they're doing there. And it really is a truly inspiring effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. I really like this report as well and really welcome it, and I hope to see this being a commitment of the Council going forward. I just wanted to come back on one of Councillor McMillan Douglas's comments. As a board member on Tayside contracts, I've several times asked about their commitment to using local producers, and especially now that the scale of the operation is getting bigger in providing school meals. At the last meeting, I did get a commitment that they're committed to using local producers, and where a producer is too small to meet the whole contract, they are going to be making introductions to the bigger suppliers so that they can feed into the supply. So we'll keep on asking questions about that and keep on making sure that that's a priority going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miles, you've spoken already. Is it a point of clarification? You're on mute now.
It's a comment. My last one was a question.
All right, sorry, on my apologies. On you go.
No, it's just on that last point, Councillor Whiteside. We've had a meeting with the farming community already with Tayside contracts, and they're working well together, or they're trying to get a group together so that local produce can be used and utilised in school meals and everything else. It is a special, let's say, pet project for the current president of the NFU, who lives within the Tayside contracts area. So he'll be very keen to see the whole thing work. But it also ticks so many boxes for the local produce being used, saving food miles, saving a lot of carbon energy going elsewhere, and also supporting very high quality Scottish food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Devine.
Yeah, I've just hung on here. Like everybody else, I think I absolutely welcome this report, and I know that it's taken a great deal of work to bring it together, because there are a lot of disparate things going on, and like Councillor Bray said, so many different kinds or models of community work going on. I think it is vitally important to get to the people who live in flats and to find areas around there, because they don't have gardens. Some people have gardens and do grow a lot of food. Some people have gardens and don't grow a lot of food, but it would be absolutely wonderful to do that. And in Forfar, we've got the Forfar Open Garden Space, and while they grow quite a lot of flowers, they do grow vegetables, but the worker there is very helpful, goes out to see different people and will give her advice, which is absolutely vital, because as we know, you know, a lot of people don't know how to garden, and so that's just a way of doing it for her.
Okay, thank you everyone for these very positive comments, and thanks to Ms Smith for answering the questions. Okay, members, you have the recommendation in the report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 13 is the interim progress report and recommendations for the change from Honeyfield Golf Links Management Committee. They have the report in front of you. Is there any questions? No. Any comments? Councillor Boyd.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. It's good to see this report coming forward. I know that in Montrose they're trying to get their memorandum and articles of association sorted out as well. It's causing a little bit more problems up there, but we will get there all the same. But the main one, the main reason why I wanted to make a comment was that I'm feeling, as the chair of the entire MOG for everywhere in Angus, I totally sympathise that we've had a lot with the COVID things, but I think we need to try and get the whole MOG back on track. So I don't know what Alison Smith feels about that.
Okay. Well, actually, comments, but Alison, do you want to, Ms Smith, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Deputy. I was happy to make comment on that. Yes, very conscious that the work of the MOG has stalled in terms of meetings and progressing some of that. However, there has been work going on in the background. We had committed some free support that we got through Business Gateway to help with that work, and that has been progressing in some meetings going through the subgroup that was agreed through the MOG, progress some of that work. Obviously, our key action last year was to meet with the various clubs and boards and have a meeting and discuss some of the ideas. That wasn't able to happen. We've now put together an action plan, which will be going to Councillor Boyd shortly for approval about next steps, which is surrounding that engagement with the various clubs to start those discussions, to identify the issues and to look at what kind of models we might want to bring forward. And we'll also be looking to reconvene the MOG at the most convenient date that we can find for members. So hopefully get that back on track within the next few weeks.
Thank you very much, Alison.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I just really endorse Councillor Boyd's remarks, I think, and I know with certain of the issues we probably are going to need some legal advice with on our favourite topic of common good, because I think there are implications of some of the changes that are being proposed. We're going to have to make sure we're on a sound legal footing.
Yes, I think Councillor Duff and Councillor Boyd, I think the articles of association, as it were, every golf club and golf links is totally different, and it's certainly I think we are going to need some legal advice with some of them. I totally agree with you. Is there anyone else? No. Okay. You have the recommendations in front of you. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Members, agenda item number 14 is the Angus Alive update. And we'll just go. Miss Hunter or Miss Smith, do you want to say anything, or we'll just go straight to questions?
I think this report is one of a series, Deputy Provost, so I'd be happy to go straight to questions.
Yeah, okay. Any questions, members, on this? Whoa. Oh, you're getting off lightly here, I think. Comments? No comments? Okay. Again, we've got the recommendations in front of us. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item, members, number 15 is the Tay Cities Region Deal Project Acceleration. And it's a report by Ms Smith again. You've certainly had a lot of work Vivian. Do you wish to comment on this, or will we just go straight to questions? You're actually on mute.
Sorry. Maybe just briefly, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
I did mention earlier in the meeting in the information report around T-Cities that this report was an adjoining report. And I did mention that in large part, the governance for T-Cities sits with the Joint Committee. However, Angus Council has set aside £6 million in the capital plan to support the development of T-City or project work to come forward. So this report is looking at 3 different elements, one in relation to the drone project that we talked about earlier, one in relation to the opportunities for the development of the CASI, which would be the kind of hub bit of the agri-tech side of the Angus Fund resource through the Mercury programme, and also the third element, which is to do with cash flow support for the fibre element of the digital project that I mentioned earlier today. So the decision making for use of Angus Council resource is for Angus Council. And so the recommendations are before you, that you consider supporting these projects. There is a risk associated with that because none of the business cases, full business cases, have been signed off through Joint Committee at this point in time. However, there's been a lot of work underway. The outline business case for the Angus Fund, the 26.5 million, which accounts for both the drone project and the agri-tech project, has been signed off by Joint Committee and government. And so they have given their agreement to the direction of travel. All of the resources that we're asking Angus Council to invest at this time will be refunded in due course, along with the timeline of accessibility of funding through the overarching T-Cities arrangements. So that the report is there for your consideration. I think that the projects that we're bringing forward, if the council are minded to support them, are really important projects. They will lead both to jobs and economic development in due course, should you agree to support the early funding of these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No questions. Comments? Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I just say again, thank you to Vivian Smith and all those who have been involved in T-Cities deal. And that goes back before I went on to it. I'm now the Vice Chair. And Bob Miles was a big help to me when I went in. T-Cities deal has been a long time coming, but Hospital Field has come on stream. That is going to be a fantastic facility. And in fact, they're reckoning a world-class facility in Arbroath, South Angus. So that's super news. The hard work that Vivian and the rest of the team have put into this, it's now really starting to show the benefits. The 3 asks today to accelerate, they're fantastic projects. And they're certainly a risk worth taking. I know that Perth, they took a risk with their City Hall, and I'm going to urge all members to support this report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I would agree with the leader of the council here. I think it's a modest amount of money we're asked for here, about £750,000, to accelerate these projects, and I think we should endorse that. And thanks to Vivian Smith for her efforts.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I very much support the words of my two colleagues on the Tay Cities board. And I just think it's very good that we had the foresight to put £6 million aside from, or rather into a programme for advancing the Tay Cities deal, because we foresaw this sort of thing happening where we had projects to move ahead on, but perhaps everything wasn't signed off. The risks, and I'm extremely aware that everything is going to be recorded for 20 years now, so I'm choosing my words with care, but the risks really here are very small, because the three projects are all projects which have been advanced through the Tay Cities system, and the money will be repaid from the Tay Cities deal. The only thing really, the only risk is that if one of these projects' final business case wasn't agreed, and I think that it is a very small risk, and it is well worth taking that risk to promote the three projects which are outlined in the paper. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan Douglas. Councillor Sturrock.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, all I'm going to say, I'm quite happy to support the Tayside City deal at Triumvirate, who already spoken before me. So just a full support to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sturrock. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, Convener. If we're too risk averse, we'll never be better than middling. So crack on.
Yes, I agree with every member's comment. I think there's some excellent projects in there, and as Councillor Duff said, it's not a huge sum of money. So we have the recommendations in the report. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Now, members, agenda item number 16 is the possible exclusion of the public and press. Do we agree to exclude the public and press in consideration of the next item on the agenda?
Agreed.
Okay, then you have a link from Mr.
As part of the exempt report, there is an exempt addendum, which also needs to be taken in private. So that's been circulated to members.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCaskill. And we've all got the link, so we'll see you in the next meeting. Thank you.